Right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today, and welcome to Age UK London's mayoral hustings event. I'm so delighted that we've got so many people in the room today, and I'm also so delighted that we're able to have this event here in person. I think some of you might have been signed up to attend the hustings that we had planned for 2020, and of course, as everyone remembers, in-person events did not happen in March 2020, so it's lovely to have you all here today and to be able to have this event face-to-face. I'm delighted to have one of the candidates and representatives of three of the other candidates here today to take your questions and a chance for you to hear from them directly about what their offer to older Londoners would be. Just before we start, I wanted to say a quick thank you to Clifford Chance for hosting us in this lovely venue and for the delicious lunch that they put on earlier, and mention a couple of bits of housekeeping. The first is that we're not expecting a fire alarm, so if you do happen to hear a fire alarm, please follow the directions of the Age UK London team and the Clifford Chance team, who will direct you where you need to go. And the other thing is, please just to ask, if you have a mobile phone, could you turn it off or put it on silent, please? Now, before we go on, I just wanted to share a short film that we've put together about the upcoming mayoral elections and what older Londoners are hoping to see from the next Mayor of London.
I think that the next mayor has to be honest in their campaign, aware of pensioners and the struggles they have mentally and physically when money's a problem. It's a problem for everybody, but when you're older, you don't have the confidence and the stability to do lots of things.
They put a restriction on using the Freedom Pass before 9 a.m. We have been affected very badly because we cannot go to doctor's appointment before 9 a.m. We are pensioners with very limited income. I'm forced to take other means of transport, which will be expensive. Whoever is going to be the Mayor of London, our humble request is to restore the Freedom Pass before 9 a.m. We have delivered a petition of 90,000 people at the City Hall. It was a massive petition. Many people suffer, and the suffering is not being recognized by the politicians.
People who cannot use a computer, I'm one of the millions who can't. And my life has been made an absolute misery. I want the mayoral candidates to give a lead by making sure that all London-based public services have an offline option, like a telephone number. I want them to say that we shouldn't treat people where we marginalise them, exclude them and treat them like they're dead. So yes, you will pick up votes, but do it because it's right.
I had a couple of doses of cancer and I found myself looking for public lavatories. And I couldn't find any. I'm not going to let that limit me. I'm still going to do my cycling. I think the Mayor of London's got to take the lead and free those people who are compelled to stay at home, who are not fully participating in life. Have clean public lavatories, decent lavatories for decent people. You get all the rhetoric, but nothing is done. And I want something done.
So you might have seen, as well as holding this hustings event today, Age UK London is also today launching our manifesto. So our calls for the policies that we want to see from the next Mayor of London. And this document is based on input from more than 700 older Londoners and older Londoners organisations, including the London Age Friendly Forum, who we've been working closely with on this. So I hope that everyone in the audience reads it, but I particularly hope that our panellists and candidates read it heed it and take it on board. There's an awful lot of different areas covered in it, but I feel it's really important that whoever the next Mayor of London is, that they take the views and the experiences of older Londoners seriously, and that they take concrete action to make London more age-friendly. We saw the publication at the end of last year of the action plan to make London a more age-friendly city, but the publication of that action plan isn't the end point. Really, it's just the beginning. So we need to see the next mayor committing to action, listening to older Londoners, and really doing things to make London a better place for its older residents. I'm now going to introduce our panel. So immediately to my right, to your left, we have Zoë Gerbutt, the Green candidate. Next to her, we have Hina Bokhari, who is representing the Liberal Democrat candidate, Rob Blackie. Then we have Nick McLean, who is representing the Conservative candidate, Susan Hall. And finally, Joanne McCartney, representing the Labour candidate, Sadiq Khan. Just to give you a sense of how we're going to run this afternoon, I'm going to ask our panellists one by one to come up and make a short opening statement. Then we're going to move on to questions. I was delighted that we had so many people submit questions in advance. The only downside of that fantastic level of engagement is, of course, I'm afraid we're not going to be able to cover every question that was put forward, but we will be sharing contact details through our newsletter after this event on how you can contact the candidates directly so that you can follow up with those questions. And we hope that this discussion today is really just the start of a conversation and not the end point. I'm going to call on our panellists one by one to make their 2-minute opening statement, and we'll give them a stern look when they get to the 2-minute mark. So first, we're going to be hearing from Hina Bokhari.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for this invitation. Rob Blackie's working at the moment, so I am going to be taking his place. But actually, I did ask him if I could do this, because this is so important to me, and I wanted to highlight the work that the London Assembly has been doing with Age UK. First of all, I want to say thank you to the Age UK because of all the support that they gave me in my role as a London Assembly member. They've been one of the most proactive groups that I've ever worked with as an Assembly member. And it was because of them that when I became the chair of economy, I decided to do an investigation on older Londoners' financial security and employment opportunities. Now, I was really pleased that Abi was there, and she brought in some really useful information for that committee and pushed for age-friendly employment practices. Now, 25% of older Londoners are below poverty levels, and over 50s are increasing steadily. And 34% of Londoners, older Londoners live on private rented homes. Now, Londoners are working now for longer because many Londoners are deciding not to retire because of rent costs. This is why it's really, really vital that we make sure that the workplace is also age-friendly. Now, I was really pleased that from the recommendations that we made to the Mayor, many of them are actually in the manifesto. And for example, the Employers Toolkit and more personalised careers advice and support for over 50s. And it's thanks to Age UK's contributions to the committee that the London Assembly is pushing the Mayor on many of these issues. It also highlighted that over 50-year-olds are not a homogenous group. So hands up if you are nearly 50 or over 50 in this room now. Me too. Yeah, I'll be 50 very, very soon too. So the reason is that we're all very different. We're all coming from different faiths and backgrounds and communities, but we have to have groups like Age UK working for some really important issues. Now, one of the most important issues that I think that unites us is toilets. 9 in 10 Londoners consider toilet provision before making a journey, and that's nearly all of us. Parents, disabled people, people with health conditions, pregnant women, all need to have toilet provision, and it needs to be adequate, which isn't at the moment. So I'm really pleased that we worked with the London Working Group as well, the Cost of Living Working Group that the Age UK helped us with. There were some really great, insightful recommendations from that too. We want to make sure that Londoners are feeling safe and secure, and make sure that there are long-term decisions that make a real impact, not quick fixes for elections. On the 2nd of May, you're going to get a chance to vote for your Mayor of London, and you're also going to get a chance to vote for your London Assembly member. Please make sure that you're thinking about who's going to be scrutinising the Mayor of London for real change, because if we have Assembly members pushing for real change, make sure that older Londoners are getting the benefit. It means that we all get benefit too. Thank you.
And next we're going to hear from the Green candidate, Zoë Gerbutt.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks to Age UK for organising and for that wonderful, really powerful video. I found myself nodding along because it's lots of things that we align with from Green values. I'm going to tell you a bit about myself. Public service runs through my family. My parents were teachers, which gave me a real sense of public duty and of inclusion and of the public sector, for which I spent over 10 years of my life working in jobs in adult social care, as well as children's health, as well as public health. And most recently in the NHS, I've managed big budgets and I've helped to redesign services to make them more accessible to people, as well as working on programmes to address social isolation for older people and making sure that NHS staff can make referrals to social, legal and welfare advice for people coming to get support. The same values that drew me to the public sector drew me to the Green Party, which I joined in 2014, because we deeply care about addressing inequality and the climate crisis. I got elected as a councillor in Hackney with the strongest Green vote in London, and I've got a track record on acting what people tell me is important to them and getting things done. And I've done that in Hackney, and I really want to do that in London. The Greens in City Hall work really closely with Age UK, and they're a group that I reached out to as soon as I was selected as candidate. We think that everyone has the right to a safe, affordable, to rent and heat home. We're beyond a housing crisis, but that doesn't mean that we can't do more to fix it. I want to set up a rent commission to get rents down, and I want to listen to older people to make sure you've got as many options as possible for different types of housing. I also want to cut daily costs. I want to reinstate that pre-9 a.m. travel that we hear is really important to get you to your health appointments and to just get out and about your business. And I want everyone to live a healthy, active life. So I'll make it easier for you to get around. I'll declutter the pavements, I'll increase toilets, which is a great green piece of work in City Hall, and I'll make sure that you've got places to sit and rest. And I also want to make the city safer, respect everyone's diversity, and not tolerate hate towards anybody. I want to also appoint an older people's champion, so an elders champion within City Hall, so you can scrutinise the Mayor's plans and hold me to account. There's lots more that we want to be talking about, and it's a really important time to be voting Green. People are voting Green in record numbers across the country. Greens are being seen as an increased vote in London, with a third party we have been for over a decade. So please support the Greens and vote Green on the 2nd of May. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Joanne McCartney, representing the Labour candidate.
Thank you, and it's good to be here with you today and to take your questions a little later. I'm here representing Sadiq Khan, and the current Mayor of London and Labour candidate. I'm a London Assembly member, and I've served as Sadiq's Deputy Mayor for the last 8 years. Now, as Mayor, Sadiq Khan wants London to be the greatest city in the world in which to grow old. Many Londoners love the vibrancy of our city and couldn't imagine living anywhere else. And you will make a huge contribution to our economy, civic life and culture. However, we do know that many older Londoners face many challenges, and Sadiq's determined to do all he can to make sure that London is an age-friendly city. The launch of the Mayor's Action Plan for an age-friendly London last November was a significant milestone, and we should all be proud of all that we've achieved working together. And thank you, Age UK, for your help in making that be achieved as well. But the Mayor is clear that the next task is about continuing to engage with older Londoners through organisations such as Age UK and key partners to ensure that the plan actually delivers what it says, that tangible action that is needed to improve lives. And he's already working on that on a range of policies. So we're investing in homes that meet the needs of older Londoners, making public transport more accessible, cleaning up London's polluted airs, which disproportionately affects older Londoners. He's working with boroughs to increase the uptake of the pension credit and has helped thousands of older Londoners receive an additional £8.4 million in those benefits so far. And he has also invested to help low-income and marginalised communities, including older Londoners. But let's be under no illusions. This election is a two-horse race between Sadiq and the Tory candidate. And a vote for any other party is a vote for the Tories. And frankly, they cannot be trusted with our public services. They cannot be trusted to stand up for older Londoners, either on housing, poverty, or the environment. A lot has been achieved over the last 8 years, but there is much more to do. I can give you assurance that Sadiq will continue working from City Hall to ensure that older Londoners not only feel valued, but can thrive in our city. And thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
And finally, we're going to hear from Nick McLean, representing the Conservative candidate.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nick McLean, Conservative Group Leader on Merton Council, and I'm also a London Assembly London-wide list candidate. And it's a real pleasure to be here today on behalf of Susan Hall and the Conservative campaign. Susan is, of course, sorry that she cannot be here today because I know she would have wanted to hear what everyone has to say. She has put listening to Londoners the centre of her campaign. And that doesn't just mean listening to those who shout the loudest or those who pretend that London speaks with one voice, because it doesn't. London is complicated, multifaceted, and all Londoners have different ambitions, needs, and opinions. And it's critical that a mayor, and indeed any politician, listens to what people are saying. That's why organisations like Age UK are so important in the conversation, because they can so adeptly speak up and represent a key demographic in London on very practical, day-to-day issues. I noticed that alongside the policy asked in your manifesto, from 60-plus travel, which you may be aware Susan has committed to reinstating, to tackling digital exclusion, it also calls for mayoral candidates who will listen to older Londoners. Well, on that, you are very much pushing at an open door. Thank you, and I look forward to taking questions and hearing comments from everyone here today.
Wonderful. We're now going to go to questions, and I believe my colleagues Sharon and Dom are going to be roving around with microphones. Our first question that we're going to take is from Rosemary Mays from Barnet. Rosemary, can we pass a microphone, and we'll wait until you've got the microphone so that everyone can hear you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. My question is, poverty amongst older Londoners is higher than in other parts of the UK. How will you tackle this?
Thank you, Rosemary. So I'm going to go first to Zoe on this question. So panellists have 2 minutes to respond. Zoe, how would you go about tackling poverty amongst older Londoners?
Thank you for your question, Rosemary. And this is something that I care really passionately about, because I think every older Londoner should have the opportunity to live safely and comfortably and not have any money worries and be able to fully engage in life as they really want to. But yes, sadly, as we heard from the video and that you all probably have experienced, that a disproportionate amount of Londoners are in poverty, and I think that is, that would be a top issue that I want to address. I want to help, I want to make sure that people have got access to the services that they need to have access to. As I said in my opening, I worked in the NHS to make sure that GPs and health professionals had the information to kind of warm hubs and debt advice so that they can give that to older people and people who need that advice when they come and see them. So it's making sure that everyone has that information, those services are available. We're increasing people accessing that pension credit and making sure that they can really access as many benefits as they're entitled to. But we're also making everyday things cheaper. So I want to set up a rent commission to make sure that we can bring private rents down. I want to bring back the pre-9 a.m. travel so that travel's cheaper, and just making that every day more affordable for people. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to turn to Joanne. Your response.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's shocking that 1 in 4 older Londoners live below the poverty line, and that's been made much worse by the Tories' cost of living crisis. Inflation has been sky high over the last couple of years. It is now at around 5-6%, but you may remember last year, at one stage, food inflation was running at 19%, really cutting into people's budgets. But the Mayor is already supporting older Londoners at risk of poverty in several ways. Firstly, he's teamed up with London councils and 17 boroughs, and they're running the first large-scale data-driven collaborative take-up campaign for pension credit. That so far has reached over 8,000 older households who have received letters from their local council telling them they were eligible but not claiming. And that's resulted in almost £8.5 million going back into the pockets of those older Londoners. Through the Mayor's Affordable Homes programme and Care Support Specialised Housing programme, we're building specialised affordable homes for older Londoners to reduce costs. I think, 8 years ago, we would never have dreamt there would be a situation where we're having to provide debt advice because the cost of living crisis is so out of control. But the Mayor is now funding the face-to-face advice services across the city, focus on embedding support in a range of community settings such as food banks. And to date, this work has helped tens of thousands of Londoners access a total of over £9 million in income gains. Through the Making London Fairer campaign, over 100,000 leaflets on how to access cost of living support were sent to households, including older Londoners. And to mark International Older People's Day, the Mayor has signed the Age-Friendly Employers Pledge, seeking to attract, retain and develop older people, because we know many are working longer. But also staying in good work can be essential to a healthy and secure later life, providing those improved pension contributions and the ability to manage caring responsibilities. It's important that the GLA leads in this area, and so I'm really glad that the Mayor has signed up to the Age-Friendly Employers scheme and is urging other employers to do the same. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. Nick, what would a Conservative Mayor do on poverty amongst older Londoners?
Well, thank you very much. Just a quick correction there. Joanne said inflation was 5%. It's not. It's called 3.6 and coming down. And interest rates are about to follow that as well. No Londoner, an elderly Londoner, should live in poverty. They should live with dignity. What would a Conservative Mayor do? Well, we would strip back the cost of City Hall. Since Sadiq Khan was elected in 2016, the mayoral precept has gone up 70%. And what is that money spent on? £151 million on beach parties, virtue signalling and self-promotion, £30 million to his tube mates, tube strikers, £6 million putting new names on train lines that already have names, and a 45% increase in the staff costs at GLA. And of course, let's talk about ULIS, the most disgraceful attack, a tax on the poorest in society by expanding it out to Outer London. I'm an Outer London councillor. I have seen firsthand the damage that it's done to our residents. Time and time again, the elderly now are absolutely, the elderly that can't afford a new car, that are quite happy with the car they've got, can't afford a new one, are now isolated. How is that fair? Well, the simple answer, it is not. And that is why Susan Hall is the only mayoral candidate promising, and it is a promise, on day one of her mayoralty, it will be removed.
And finally, I turn to Hina.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that I mentioned earlier was I was really pleased that the committee that Abi and Age UK were at really pushed for the pension credit uptake to be made more aware of, and I'm really pleased that the Mayor of London did take that on and invested more into that campaign. There were other things that we've been working on in the London Assembly, and I'm really pleased that this is a cross-party approach that we have, which is on the cost of living report that we did. Again, Age UK was involved with. From that, I think what was most upsetting really throughout the whole of the investigation was learning about the mental health impact that the cost of living crisis is having on so many people. This goes across the board, and particularly with older Londoners. One of the people that we talked to said that, you know, they had their own property, but they were struggling to pay for food, and they were just staying in their room, closing the door, and just not talking to anyone about it, and just stayed there to die. That's the most depressing part that I think that we have to recognise that we need to tackle. I think it's crucial that we have mental health support for older Londoners and across the board. That isn't patchwork. That doesn't happen in some places better than others. It has to be a uniform approach across London, and that support for Londoners is crucial. The other thing that we really wanted to push for, the Liberal Democrats, was to help Londoners and older Londoners as well to reduce their cost of bills, particularly when it comes to energy costs. And something called the Green Doctor Scheme, that is fantastic. Means that people will come to your house and give you advice based on your property and where you live. So rather than an online service, so the Mayor of London does have a cost of living hub, which is online. What we were proposing was an approach where somebody actually came to your house, talked to you, talked about how you lived, and what was going on in your life. A very personal approach on how to reduce the cost of your bills and also to reduce emissions. So there are strategies that we really are pushing for, but the key thing is long-term, no quick solutions, really listening to the needs of Londoners and older Londoners specifically on what works for them and what will be real solutions for them.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Hina. Can I just remind everyone again, if anyone's got a mobile phone, please do put it on silent. We're going to move to our next question now, which is from Jackie Cast from Croydon. Jackie, are you there?
Good afternoon, everyone. My question concerns travel, and Zoe and Nick have already touched on this. But now that the pandemic is behind us, will you reinstate use of the Freedom Pass and the 60-plus Oyster card so that older Londoners can attend medical appointments without penalty?
So, thank you very much, Jackie, for that question. Can I ask Joanne to respond first on that one?
Yep. Thank you for that. And I know that's something that is really important to you. What I would say is that during the pandemic, Londoners did the right thing and they stayed at home. Because most of the money that comes to run the fairs on a day-to-day basis comes from fares, the fare income, that was decimated. So it required government support to keep the transport system working. But because of that, the government tried to punish London. We were already the only major city in Europe that did not receive an operating grant from central London. And if you may remember, because Age UK had a campaign on it, the government tried to take away the 60-plus Oyster altogether. And it was only because Sadiq fought that and stepped into that is still being retained. We would love to to reinstate the travel before 9 o'clock, but we just aren't in a position to do so yet. The government is not giving Transport for London at the moment more than a one-year funding deal, so we're having to go every year back to government to do it. Other areas across the country have got 3-4-year funding deals. We haven't. And can I just say, I know Nick said that the Tory candidate will reinstate it. I can't remember her ever standing up to her own government when they were threatening to take it away. So I don't believe that.
Nick, would you like to respond?
Okay, very simple answer. Yes. Susan Hall is committed. Susan Hall is committed. Well, where will we get the funding from? Well, we could also cut the waste in City Hall. I've just remembered. 151 million spent on beach parties, 30 million on tube strikers, 6 million. There's lots of money. You know, but what we've got to do is select political priorities. Joanne's not correct. The government has provided 2 multi-billion-pound bailouts. And what we also get an awful lot, Hina will be able to back me up on this one because we see it in Merton Council. Labour politicians never taking responsibility for the remits that they undertake. So to answer your question, I can absolutely categorically say Susan Hall will reinstate the Freedom Pass and the 60-plus Oyster card back to pre-pandemic situation.
Thank you, Nick. Hina?
Yes, the Liberal Democrats will be wanting to increase free travel for older Londoners. We also want to make sure that there are better services in outer London for bus travel and more investment in the dial-a-ride scheme as well. So there's many areas that the Liberal Democrats are pushing for better transport access for Londoners, and also making sure that we have accessibility. There are not enough stations that are step-free right now. So there are so many issues that I know that you have been campaigning on, which the Liberal Democrats are fully supportive of. So you'll be very pleased to hear that, I hope.
Thank you. And Zoe?
Thanks. Yeah, we do have an amazing transport system in London, but it is too expensive across the board. And I totally support this ask to reinstate the pre-9 a.m. It's Greens in City Hall, particularly Sian Berry, who put forward the petition to the Mayor of London calling for this to be reinstated, because we don't think that older Londoners should have to bear the brunt of the TfL money lost through the pandemic. I know through Age UK's report, and just being a morning person myself, you want to have choice to go out and about whenever you want to, and we don't want you missing hospital appointments or caring opportunities that you have. Like, we need you to be out and about and being able to do that with your free travel card. We've been pushing and asking questions of the Mayor to include this in the budget, and we think this is about priorities, and we think this is the right one. And we'd also go about updating the bus fleet to make sure that it's got more space for wheelchairs. We'd look to do step-free access and toilets on the tube network, which I'm sure we'll come on to too. So yes, this is very much a priority that Greens have been pushing for in City Hall, and shows the impact that kind of Greens, having Green Assembly members in there to kind of push for your voice in City Hall as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to hear a couple of people mention step-free access, because I know that there's actually a few people who wanted to be here today who weren't able to because lifts are out of order at various stations. So, you know, we're seeing the impact of decisions like that all the time. Right, we're going to move on to our next question, which is from Devika Banerjee from Islington. Devika, are you...
Thank you. What steps will you take to lessen the digital divide?
Thank you very much. So we've got that. What steps would you...
What steps will you take to lessen the digital divide?
Right, so the divide between those who are online and those who are offline. I'm going to turn to Nick for your response on this one first. What would a Conservative mayor do on digital inclusion?
Well, firstly, no Londoner should be excluded because of the increase in technology. Look, it is a challenge, but we need to put out schemes, etc., to ensure there is offline provision. The best way that Susan believes, and she's been a big advocate of this in occasions and push for information just from the GLA, also to ensure that that's been offline, is to work with the boroughs. And of course, that's where one of Susan's strengths is, in fact, as a former council leader, she knows how to work with the boroughs and borough leaders. In fact, I think after 8 years in City Hall, Sadiq Khan is still yet to actually get around to meet the 32 borough leaders, which is a bit of an indictment, because how can you listen if you're not talking to those that are actually leading? So I think that's what Susan will be looking to do. In fact, I know that's what she's looking to do, to make sure these initiatives, to make sure that the technology deficit, etc., is pushed through initiatives at borough level, because they are the best place. It is for the Mayor of London to be a champion, and that's what Susan will do. But she recognises the need, as in the video said, that there has to be an offline provision.
Great, thank you, Nick. Hina, what would a Liberal Democrat mayor do on the digital divide?
Yeah, I mean, I've been pushing for this for a long time, specifically on which I mentioned earlier, the cost of living hub that needed to have a reach that wasn't just digital. And I think there's too many hubs that the Mayor of London does keep on introducing, which are often a cheaper way of getting things that he wants to get done, and doesn't mean it accesses enough people. And I've been really, really concerned about that. I was glad to see that we saw some from pushes from the Liberal Democrats in the London Assembly to make sure that there was more information, for example, through leaflets, through face-to-face discussions as well, when it came to his support groups. The other area of concern that I have, though, is that, that he has got a massive adult education budget which can be spent on skills, and that could really be pushed towards older Londoners to improve their skills for digital access. But at the end of the day, we also need to make sure it's affordable as well, and Londoners need to be able to afford to be able to get online and have the access to computers and laptops. Libraries are great and they're a great resource, but we already know that councils are suffering at the moment with cost cuts, and lots of libraries are being threatened to be closed. So there's a real concern that those places of access for Londoners generally to get IT support and digital support may be reduced anyway. So we need to do more to make sure that there's affordable access to digital access to all of these issues as well. And I've been working with Age UK on asking the Mayor of London to make sure that lots of the online projects and programmes that he has is strengthened, and that the more investment is put into those projects.
Thank you. And finally, Zoe.
Thanks. I think this speaks to the heart of the sort of London and the sort of world that we want to live in, because I know that the world is changing and becoming more digital and online, but we're all human and really need that human contact. And I think this speaks to making sure that we're maintaining options so that people can pick up the phone and get the information they need. I know just booking a train's got really hard. I'd like to take my bike on the train, and navigating the website's a pain, and I like to be able to pick up the phone. And I think it is about skills, it is about kit, but it's more about fear and about human contact. And I think, we've been defending things like the paper tickets for train travel. We were on picket lines trying to keep the train stations open, the ticket stations at train stations, because they're incredibly important. I also advocate for my local market, make sure that people can use cash, because we don't want to lose options to use cash either. So we're absolutely committed to keeping as many personal and people consultations in City Hall, and making sure that we're supporting the boroughs to meet their duties, and just making sure that no one's ever excluded from moving services online. We also, I mentioned in my intro, wanting a elders champion, so there's lots of people who represent different groups of people in City Hall and holding the mayor to account. So having an elders champion who could really hold City Hall and the mayor to account, and feed back if this isn't happening. Thank you.
And finally, Joanne, what would a Labour mayor do?
Thank you. This is such an important question, because so much of our life is now dealt with online, whether it's paying bills, access to bank accounts with our high street banks closing down, and keeping in touch with family and friends. So the Mayor has taken action already, and will continue to address digital exclusion amongst older Londoners and promote the use of accessible, positive and user-friendly communications. He has launched a Get Online programme. That's London's first digital inclusion service, and through that, the Mayor plans to support at least 75,000 Londoners, including older Londoners, by providing more free devices to people in need, providing free mobile connectivity, and ensuring older Londoners are supported to get those basic digital skills. And the adult education budget is actually being used to provide older Londoners with those skills already. To ensure no Londoners are left behind in the digital network rollout, the Mayor is working with partners to make sure that those high-speed broadband, those fibre network is available across London. We have cold spots at the moment. He's working to upgrade public sites so that we can have improved digital services and free Wi-Fi as we move around the country, the city. He's also been lobbying and trying to work with providers to promote social tariffs. That's lower tariffs for those on low-income households, and to work with London councils to develop a strategy for copper switch-off, because we're really worried that some residents may become disconnected. But it's always important to have alternative means of communication. So I talked about the pension credit campaign. That was actually done by writing out rather than digital. So, 8,000 letters went out to older Londoners, which was extremely successful. So we need to do both, but make sure no one is left behind as we move towards more digital services.
Great. Thank you. We've got our next question from Thelma Purcell from Southwark.
Good afternoon. I was so relieved that my journey time was half an hour to here. What will you, your candidate, do to stop the loolish, which is when people don't leave their homes as much as they would like because of a lack of public toilets? How will you enable all people, especially less able people, to get out and about?
So, public toilet provision. I know this is an issue close to the heart of many of our supporters. I know that we've got quite a few people in the audience here today who've been involved in local campaigns on improving provision. But turning to our candidates, so Hina first, what would a Liberal Democrat mayor do to improve public toilet provision in London?
Absolutely agree, we need to do better with toilets. We recently had a petition in Merton, I'm a Merton councillor as well, to get provision for toilets in Morden Station. But that's not the only station. It's pretty much everywhere we've got a lack of access to toilets. And there are people who need toilets because of health conditions, not just because of age, but also for anyone. You know, it could be people who are pregnant, who, myself, I'm a parent, I've got young kids. So we need these toilets across the board. Unfortunately, I think the Mayor of London has committed a little bit of money towards this, but not enough. And I'm pleased to say that my colleague here, Caroline Russell, who's here, has done a great report on this. And I'm happy to talk about the work. Again, we are a cross-party London Assembly group, and we work really well together, and we really want to make sure that this is an important subject that is tackled by all of us, and it has to be done by all of us. It has to be a cross-party effort, otherwise it won't happen. So therefore, I will support anyone who wants to make this a reality. The cost, though, is the issue. We do need more money, and we need money not just coming from the Mayor, but from the government as well, to make sure that we have toilets everywhere across our system. Because I'm worried, and I'm sure Caroline Russell would agree with this, that the cost could go into just the works that are needed just to update our very, very old transport system. We need to have a specific amount of money dedicated just to toilets. And so you'll definitely have the Liberal Democrats behind that 100%.
Thank you, Hina. Zoe, what would you do on this?
Thank you. And I know that Caroline Russell's already been mentioned. I'm very excited to be able to talk to some of the work that Caroline's done, but also just to recognise that it's a basic public need to be able to go to the toilet. And the fact that we talk about this and the fact that it hasn't been solved, I think, is a travesty. But we know that less than a quarter of the stations in Zone 1 to 2 don't have a toilet. And we know that the big upgrade that Bank Station had recently didn't include any toilets. It got completely deprioritised, which would not happen under a Green Mayor. I also spent some time at Tooting Broadway, which is known as a toilet desert, recently with Caroline and another colleague, and everyone came up to us. We had a sign saying, would you like more public toilets on the train network? People just had their own stories, their own personal stories about when they've had to pay money to go to the toilet somewhere else, and it was just really overwhelming, the response that we received. So the work Caroline's done on the Assembly first started around bus drivers needing access to toilets as part of a workers' rights issue, and then got contacted by Age UK champions, probably lots of people in this room, saying, can you also campaign for more toilets more widely? And secured that money from the Mayor, that investment that's going in now. But the Greens in City Hall have been pushing for more money to go from the budget, and we've committed 20 million at least from in our manifesto to get more toilets so that people can move around in comfort. I also mentioned that we're up for getting more representation and more voices into City Hall, so we'd actually established a LUSAR to make sure that this was happening, and who would oversee the kind of toilet commission that would just make sure that this work is done. Thank you.
Joanne.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you for the questioner. It is a really serious issue. And it's not just older Londoners, but it's those with medical problems and parents with young children as well, and I know many people plan their journeys and visits around whether they can go to the toilet. As an Assembly member, I undertook the first scrutiny on public toilets on the London Assembly quite a number of years ago when Boris Johnson was Mayor. And there was reluctance from the Tories actually at that point to actually do it. They said it's not an important issue, it was just for local councils to deal with. It actually got the highest postbag that we'd ever had for any scrutiny, and I'm really glad that Caroline has taken that up recently as well. The Mayor is delivering more accessible and inclusive public toilets as part of his Good Growth programme, and that will continue if he's re-elected. There's also provisions in planning rules, so large-scale developments open to the public or large public realm spaces now are expected to have publicly accessible toilets, and those toilets should be available during opening hours or 24 hours a day for public realm. TfL has currently coming up with a toilet strategy, and they're about to publish a feasibility report, which will show where on their estate they can put additional toilets, as well as how they can upgrade the toilets that are already there. There are at the moment, around 320 toilets across 145 sites across the TfL estate. And we also we need to do more to enhance customer information to ensure that they're signed properly. That includes on the website, on the tube maps, and at stations. So I'm really pleased that Sadiq is now saying that he will actually put money in every year going forward to make sure that we do improve public toilets. I have to say, though, that a lot of public toilets in general in our high streets and so forth have been closed over the last years. There isn't a public duty to provide toilets. I think there's a public duty to provide men's toilets only, but not for women. So the legislation needs changing as well. And as you'll know, your local authorities who often maintain those toilets have had approximately 50 to 60% cut from central government over the last 14 years, so many more have closed. But we do need to look at alternatives.
Thank you. Finally, Nick, what would a Conservative mayor do on public toilet provision?
Obviously, we're very supportive of it. In fact, Hina just spoke about the initiatives in Merton Council, and we, as a cross-party, are looking at ways of improving the provision. I know that Merton is one of 5 councils that are working with Age UK on this particular topic. One of the areas we're looking at, and I think this is where the Mayor of London can take a lead, because that's the leadership role, that's community engagement and talking to businesses, libraries, hotels, and advertising the fact that they're part of the program. So if you feel comfortable going in there just to use the toilet, and we advertise that fact. All very well, of course, for Joanne to talk about a Sadiq Khan's strategy now at TfL. As Zoe has just said, there was no toilet provision put in the bank's upgrade. It was downvalued. So once again, it's not about talking, it's about delivering. So yes, we understand, Susan understands, it's a very important issue, and she will be taking a leadership role working with the boroughs and ensuring that we can develop strategies to deliver it.
Thank you very much, Nick. We'll go to our next question, which is from Julian Lloyd from Age UK Harrow, Hillingdon and Brent. There we are.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So my question is, we're seeing an alarming increase in the numbers of homeless, but alongside that, we're also seeing a change in the profile, and an average age is increasing, and a greater number of older Londoners who are experiencing homelessness. That aligns with an increased number of older people in private rented accommodation, and that's increasing year on year, alongside a decreasing amount of sheltered housing provision. I'd like to know what your strategy would be for housing for older Londoners on state pensions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian. I think this is a really, really important area. So, housing strategy for the poorest and the most vulnerable older Londoners. Zoe, what would you do?
Thank you, and thank you for this question. everyone has the right to a safe, affordable to rent and heat home, and I think the rising numbers of homelessness are just shocking and really breaks my heart. I was, my work in the NHS that I've done was around the programme that Everyone's In, when we managed to get all the homeless people into accommodation during the pandemic, and I worked to make sure that they got the health support that they need and could support them into more secure housing, which was work I'm really proud of. But I know that, and I know as a private renter myself, I know how insecure and scary it can feel and how uncertain, and how that really impacts your ability to kind of engage with your local community, because you don't know if you're going to be staying in an area beyond a certain short period. So I know that this is a real important issue just for individuals, but just for us as a society. And I think it's terrifying to hear from work that Age UK has done that only 40% of renters feel confident about their future, and I think that's something that we really, really need to listen to. So I mentioned earlier I'd bring in a rent commission to look at getting private renters into the heart of any decisions made about renters. We're really on the side of private renters. The Mayor of London needs powers to bring rents down, but that rent commission is all about putting the evidence to government and being a loud voice about why we need those powers and we need to bring those rents down. Also, you mentioned, the housing is such a massive, I've got loads of ideas and loads of thoughts on housing. Greens in City Hall also pushed the Mayor to acquire existing homes, so instead of having to build homes, we can build homes, buy homes that already exist. So we get them quicker into social housing. They're often bigger, so for family homes, and also you don't have to wait around for them to be built. So we've been really pushing for that as well. I'd also set up a cold homes task force to look at the quality of homes, to hold landlords to account, but to also make sure that we're dealing with the damp and mould in people's homes as well, because often people are terrified of complaining to their landlord to get anything fixed because they're worried about getting evicted or having their rent put up. So we'd really be on the side of renters and on the side and trying to address homelessness to make sure this isn't an issue in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne.
Yeah, thank you. Having a decent place to live is really important because it affects so many other aspects of your life, whether it's your ability to work, visit family and friends, to have good mental health and to be healthy. So the Mayor's focusing on 3 key areas. Firstly, about trying to increase the supply of affordable and accessible homes. And the Mayor's recently pledged that if re-elected, he will deliver an extra 40,000 new council homes for Londoners by the end of the decade. And he's got a good track delivery on that. Already 23,000 council homes have been started. With his affordable homes programme, we'll see nearly £9 billion invested into new affordable homes. And so to date, he has met the government, he's exceeded the government's target on building those affordable homes. There's extra funding for care and supported specialised housing programme for those that need that additional care, and that programme has now been extended. Action on rogue landlords, so renters can look up to see whether their landlord has been flagged as being a rogue landlord. Secondly, about tackling fuel poverty and improving housing conditions. And again, the Mayor has got a strong record on this. His Warmer Homes programme offered grants to make sure that homes were more poverty friendly, to provide heating and insulation improvements to homes. And to date, over 4,500 homes have benefited for that. He's established a Warmer Homes advice service, providing free local energy advice services for vulnerable Londoners. And also, of course, Zoe mentioned the Council Homes Acquisition Programme. 10,000 homes are being purchased at the moment, which means that that's cheaper for local councils who are spending many millions a week on temporary accommodation that's not suitable. But what we really need is the government to pass their renters reform bill. We know that there are many people every week being evicted from rental properties through no fault of their own, and we need that Section 21 evictions to be abolished, and government has promised it and it hasn't delivered. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Nick.
Thank you. Well, I agree with Joanne. It is absolutely everyone's right and expectation and aspiration to have a safe home and a roof over their head. And we need to get to that stage. What Susan is saying is that what we need to do, though, is to reopen the London plan and remove some of the restrictions that Sadiq Khan has put on himself with the red tape. We need to build. Yes, we have a supply and demand issue, and we need to build more homes. At the moment, we're not getting those targets. Sadiq Khan is, it's 4% of a target in the last 3 quarters. Of the £4.8 billion Building Council Homes for Londoners programme. Since May, how many of homes have been started? 0. This is what we need to do. It's about delivery. We need a mayor that listens and a mayor that delivers, and we need to build more homes. And it's just not, at the moment there's such restrictions in the London plan that unless certain numbers are being targeted in affordability, we're not getting any homes. Now, look, 10% of something is better than 100% of nothing, and that's what we're getting at the moment. We also need to focus, and Susan again is very, very understands this, that the adaptability of homes, we need to build homes but be able to adapt them for the needs of the residents. And of course, parking. Sadiq Khan once again wants to attack on motorists, building homes where you can't park a car. He's attacking on you can't park your car, you have to pay to drive your car. He's not funding public transport. He's just making life more difficult. You know, I went into politics. I'm a conservative, and the reason I went into politics is to make people's lives easier. All the other parties, all they want to do is tell you how to live your life. Susan will listen. Susan will listen, she'll listen, and she'll deliver for what you want.
Thank you, Nick. Finally, Hina.
Thank you. Housing is such a massive issue, from renting to actually home ownership as well. So, yes, we really do need to have some very serious renter reform legislation, and ending Section 21 evictions would be one of the very important steps towards that. But I also mentioned the fact that older renters are now making decisions of not retiring, which is incredibly sad as well. So there's a real need, really, for us to focus on that particular issue, but also on the need for more homes as well. We do need to build more homes as well. There are ideas that the Liberal Democrats have got, which is adapting the high street. High streets need to be changed, and developing homes within the high street is one way forward. There's lots of buildings that are just now empty on our high streets. Using TfL land as well to increase the number of housing. There's a real need as well to support leaseholders as well. That's a massive issue. I'm sure that lots of you have been having to deal with really unfair demands of service charges that are coming through on the added costs of energy costs and everything else that you're having to pay for. So one of the things that we want to bring in as the Liberal Democrats is a real catered for housing support service for Londoners. Now that could include lawyer advice, because that's actually a massive problem. If you are a leaseholder or a homeowner, just the minefield that you have to deal with when it comes to many of these issues, and having that advice, that legal advice, could make such a massive difference. I'm having to deal with these issues all the time at the moment. And a really interesting scheme that I was looking into that the Mayor has got, called the Seaside and Country Homes Scheme, which is an unusual scheme where you can swap your housing for a property in a seaside resort. It's also been something that I've been thinking we could review and look into. And when I asked the question about that before, we found out there'd been 1,000 swaps of homes for people living from London to going and swapping with somebody who lived in a seaside since 2015. Is that something that perhaps we can look into and review as an option as well? So there's lots of ideas that the Liberal Democrats have got for housing. It's something that we've been dealing with tremendously at the moment. It's just coming up again and again and again. The stress and the mental health impact that it's having on so many Londoners is a real concern for us.
Thank you very much, Hina. Do we have any other questions on topics that we haven't already covered? Is there anyone I can see Thelma's hand in the air, but I know that you've already asked one. So we've already covered housing, digital exclusion, public toilet provision, and poverty. On other issues, I can see. So I'll take one from the woman in the turquoise T-shirt sitting in the front row. And if you could say your name before your question, please.
Hi, I wasn't going to say anything. TfL, two things. First of all, the stops themselves are really not adequate. So many of them do not have countdown boards or seating, which most of us need. And I know that there's a plan to increase the countdown boards, but only in the outer London areas, and that doesn't help me. The second thing is, you talked about costs of phone costs and things like that. Will you please ask TfL to reintroduce their free phone line? Because it cost me 30p from a landline to phone them.
Thank you very much. So we've got provision of quality of bus stops and accessing information from TfL. So I'm going to go to our candidates first for responses on that, and then we'll come back with another question. So, Joanne, can I come to you first on improving bus stops and getting information from TfL?
Yeah, thank you. And I think this relates to an earlier question about digital exclusion. Not everyone has a phone where they can get out the bus app and look at when the next bus is coming. If your bus stop previously had one and it goes out of order or service, it should be replaced. So if that's not happening, please get in touch with any one of us along here or your assembly member, and we can take that up for you quite happily. There has been a trial about putting countdowns out on the actual bus stops themselves rather than in shelters. So I think we're just awaiting the results of that trial, and if they're successful, that will mean that a lot more can be rolled out, which would be really helpful. On the phone line, I don't know about that, but I'll take that away and look into that straight away for you. Thank you.
Nick.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your question. Nice to see you again. Well, look, I'm here to represent Susan Hall, so look, I will certainly take that back to her and raise that with Susan. You know, I'm unable to comment on it now, and other than say, look, I'll take it back to Susan, raise it with her, and indeed, if they're not being replaced, as Joanne said, speak to TfL, or indeed just speak to one of your local councillors, and raise it with them. But certainly, I will take that back to Susan and raise those concerns with her.
Thank you. Hina.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We're here to serve you. The London Assembly members' job is to be the voice of London, but also to raise issues that you're concerned about, particularly things like TfL and problems with access to information that you've said. I've also been getting lots of feedback about people feeling unsafe at bus stops as well, not being able to find somewhere to sit, not getting shelter. People have been feeding back to me about floating bus stops as well, which they find really scary because there are bikes speeding past. If you are somebody who's got a sight impairment with vision or just some sort of disability or just not looking, you know, you'll get caught out. So these issues have been definitely raised with us, and I will be continuing to review particularly things like bus stops to make sure that they're safe. I mean, I want to be safe when I'm at bus stop, you know, whether it's daytime or nighttime, and I want my kids to feel safe as well. So there are many, many reasons why we need to do a lot better when it comes to that kind of Pacific area. So thank you so much for raising it.
And finally, Zoe, as Mayor, what would you do to improve bus stops?
Yeah, so I also want the journey to be easy, safe, enjoyable, as good as possible. And I think having a bus stop that meets all your needs is essential. In our last manifesto and in this one, we will be talking about our love for bus stops. And we did a nice illustration of what a reimagined bus stop could look like and would push to get the investment and put the investment into that, which included like up-to-date information, seating. We also wanted bees and solar panels, and it to just be everything as part of the local community, because it's something that people use every day and have interactions with. I think wider we've been talking about seating and just making sure that there's enough seats generally for people to sit. I challenge that as a councillor. The council I'm a councillor for has got a tendency to take benches and seats out, which I've been challenging. Because my work on the NHS has all been about not just providing services for people, but to make sure that they are accessible and meeting the needs of as many people as possible, because it's not just good enough to just have something there. It needs to be meeting the needs of everybody. And I don't know about the phone line, but I will take that one back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take a question from this block of seating. The gentleman in the baseball cap. The microphone's just coming to you, so if you just wait and... Oh, sorry, could you just wait until you've got the microphone? And could you introduce yourself before you ask your question, please?
Yeah, I'm from Croydon, and my surname is Carve. Question is, what are all the parties going to do about the crime rate, and especially the knife crime, which has just gone out of control?
Right, so crime and specifically knife crime. Nick, can I turn to you first on this issue? What would a Conservative mayor do on this one?
Okay, well, certainly crime is out of control in the city. In the last 8 years, as the Police and Crime Commissioner of London, Sadiq Khan has utterly failed. Susan has committed, fully funded £200 million to be injected into the Metropolitan Police. But also she wants to lead and continue to change the culture of the Metropolitan Police. I mean, when the Casey report was issued after the tragic death of Sarah Everard, Sadiq Khan's response to that report was, well, nothing in it surprised me. Well, if it didn't surprise him, surely he must have known what was happening. And if he knew what was happening, then why didn't he do anything about it? What an utter failure of leadership. The other thing that Susan was bringing back in, and that is bringing back borough command and dismantling the borough command units, which is basically when you're clustering together a number of boroughs. I see it in Merton, where we're partnered in particular with Wandsworth and others, but Wandsworth has a greater demand at times, and is always a problem if response assets are then pulled out of Merton and into Wandsworth. And of course there are all the over 30 police stations that Sadiq Khan has closed. So Susan will not be closing any more police stations. She will be investing £200 million, fully costed as well, into getting that. And she will also be taking a leadership role. So much of what we are seeing failing in London right now is down to lack of leadership. She will not be blaming everybody else. She will be taking responsibility, and she will be leading.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Hina.
Oh, we need to see more police on the streets, quite frankly. There's not enough of them. I know that there was a time when I was, I could walk the streets and meet my local police officer. I knew them by name, that, they knew the local people in the area, they knew the local lads, they knew the local school, they knew all the issues of the local area. Community policing is the key to making sure that we reduce crime and also to make us feel safer. It's not just knife crime. There are people who I talk to all the time about the fact that there's a rise of burglaries. There's catalytic converters that are being stolen from cars, and that's quite an aggressive crime where people are using heavy weapons to break into cars. That's terrifying if you see it happening. So there is a real need to make sure that we have police on our streets. Stations should not be closing. One of the campaigns that the Merton Liberal Democrats did was to actually save a police station. The Mayor of London was going to close Wimbledon Police Station as well as lots of other stations, and we were the only party that managed to save that station from closing down. It was imperative that we have police officers who are able to get to places where there are crime being committed quickly, and at the moment they're having to go miles and miles to go to places to help people, to support them, to deal with phone calls. People should make a phone call 999 should get the support straight away, and they're having to wait for ages sometimes to get the help. This is terrifying. So we've got to make massive investments in our community policing, make sure that our police stations aren't being closed, and we need to make sure that the Mayor of London focuses on this. Unfortunately, he's failed when it comes to policing, and he's failed when it comes to rising crime in the city.
Zoe, what would you do on crime?
Thank you for the question, and because you started speaking about knife crime, I just have to recognise how tragic it is that every time we lose a young person in this city to knife crime, I think it's horrific. And I think a lot of that has been to do with the cuts we've seen to youth services. So the youth services have been cut by over 50% across the city, work by Greens in City Hall. So Sean Berry exposed that and got more investment into youth services because young people are having a really, really difficult time. The pandemic hit them really badly and they're seeing that huge withdrawal of public services. So we need to see a huge amount of investment into youth services so we can support young people to be in safe spaces, have positive role models, have positive things to do. But I also think it's the people don't trust the Metropolitan Police at the moment to report crimes to is one of the biggest issues. We've heard that from women, from young people, from black communities, that if people don't trust a service to be able to report crimes to, we're not going to have them looked into, hold people to account or prevent them happening. So I think, a lot of what I talk about is local accountability of policing. So making sure that, yes, we've got more local police in local areas, so making sure they're in the right place, focusing on the right things that local communities need them to be focused on, but also holding them to account locally to make sure that they're driven the priorities. So these are the things that I've done in Dalston, making sure that I got the market traders, the delivery riders, residents into a room to talk about what they wanted the police to be focusing on, and then they held them to account to deliver it. So I think this is a really, really important issue for Londoners, something that I've worked on and I would be, keen to address with listening to Londoners. Thank you.
And finally, Joanne.
Thank you. Well, the Mayor has been providing leadership on policing. The Casey report that you've heard about that held that the Met was institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic only came about because Sadiq asked the then Commissioner, to commission it. I must say I'm surprised to hear from Nick that the Tory candidate wants to change the culture in the police. She's recently been talking about holding disciplinary cases behind and dealing with police officers behind closed doors so the public don't hear about them. She was the one that did her best to haul the Mayor over the calls about him trying to persuade the old Commissioner to leave the Met Police because she wasn't performing. And of course, there's been £1 billion worth of cuts to the Met Police through 13 years of austerity. That's a third of the policing budget has gone. So I'm very glad that the Tory candidate now realises there needs to be some money put back in, but she was actually very quiet when her government were actually making those cuts to our police service. The knife crime is a real issue. At the start of every violence reduction unit meeting, the Mayor reads out the names of those who have lost their lives. He feels it, and he meets those families. The Mayor's Violence Reduction Unit was the first in England. It's tasked with trying to stem the prevalence of crime and particularly working on young people, trying to prevent crime. And since the Violence Reduction Unit was created in 2019, there's been an 18% reduction in knife injuries amongst younger people. We have seen the Mayor putting in millions of pounds into youth opportunities because Zoe's right, the government have decimated youth services across the country, including here in London. So the Mayor had the £45 million Young Londoners Fund providing opportunities and activities across our city. He's providing up to 100,000 mentors for young people. We've now reached the target of nearly 70,000 mentors working with young people. So that will continue. Questioning the Met Commissioner recently, he said if he could have a little bit more money from the government, he could put 3,000 extra police on the streets. The cuts have meant that a third of civilian staff have been
we want
cut
to hear the answers, so
from
can everyone be
a third of civilian staff have been cut from the Met, which means that officers are doing back office roles where they could be out there. So the Met Commissioner has said if he could have some more money from the government, he could put 3,000 straight on the streets. Nick talked about council tax earlier. Part of the reason it's going up is because it's funding police officers. So £1 billion worth of cuts from the Met Police. The mayor's had to step in and try and fill that hole as best he can. So he's providing 1,300 extra police officers from that budget. But we really need government to step up, and we really need a Labour government that's going to invest in our public services.
Thank you. I'm going to take a question. I'm conscious I've taken one from this block of seating, this block of seating, this block of seating. Take one from Marianne in the black top down in the second to the front row. And again, please do introduce yourself.
Thank you, Abby. I'm Marianne. I'm from Age UK East London. I'm going to ask a question that's been raised to me by many of the older people who use our services. E-bikes and e-scooters, great for young people, loads of environmental benefits, but they make too many older people afraid to go out. Hazardous when abandoned on the pavements, and also really frightening, particularly in parks, because they're fast and they're silent. What are you going to do about them?
Thank you very much. Thank you for that question. It's certainly an issue that we do hear very, very frequently. I'm going to turn first to Hina. What would you do about this issue?
I'm actually really supportive of your mention of this in your manifesto and the need to work better with local councils and the Mayor of London to make sure that there is better monitoring of making sure that those bikes are put into the designated areas that they're supposed to be in, and they are just scattered everywhere, which is a great problem to so many people. You know, you're right, e-bikes are very popular. They're really a way forward for the environment. I think lots of people are really keen to keep them. So I think we're in a difficult position. We're not going to be able to get rid of them. I know that some people would probably prefer that, but I don't think that's going to happen. What we do need to do is work better with those companies to ensure that we're holding them to account. If they're not doing their job properly, because if they should be, there's a system with the apps that you're supposed to be able to make sure that if their bike is not put in the right place, it's put in the right place, it's picked up by that company. If they're not doing their job, then those councils that are running those schemes need to be holding them to account. And if they're not doing their job properly, then they need to stop their contracts with those companies. We do need to be a lot tougher and a lot firmer with them than we are at the moment. And I would love to see the day where we're seeing bikes being used responsibly and in a way that's going to benefit Londoners, rather than making it a real haphazard, accident-prone way of getting around London. It's just not good enough at the moment. So I completely agree with the Age UK's position on this, and we'll be supporting it and doing as much as we can to make sure that we have a better service.
Thank you. Zoe.
Thank you. I regularly walk around Hackney picking up Lime bikes and complaining to Lime about them being scattered all over the pavement. And me and my Green Councillor colleague on Hackney Council have been really holding Lime to account to make sure that they could only use them in Hackney if they are going to be in those designated areas, and actually holding them to account to make sure, that if they're going to provide the service, it needs to be provided properly. I've been talking to the cycling groups who also support regulation across the whole of London, so holding them to account at a London level, because there's all this haphazard difference between the boroughs about how they're approached, and making sure that they're holding their users to account to make sure that they are using them in the most appropriate way. I also think this is about education around where it's appropriate to use them, but also making cycling routes better so that people are on the roads, well, not on the roads, but in the protected cycle lane, so they aren't on the pavements or in, they are actually in the kind of designated cycle infrastructure, because I do think they are brilliant. They're additional way of people being able to get around, but they need to be used properly, and we need to be holding the companies to account at a London level so that it's standardised across the city.
Thank you. Joanne.
Yes, I mean, I've asked the Mayor questions about this because I've had residents complaining at me about them. I mean, TfL is working with London councils to try and get some sort of uniformity across the city, and we do need to continue working on that. As they roll out to different boroughs, I think you can learn lessons. So I've noticed they've recently rolled out, for example, to Haringey, and there are now very clear demarked zones where they should be parked, but you still find them littering, and they are a hazard. I agree that the e-bikes you know, if they can encourage more people to be healthier and cycle around London, that they can be a really good thing. I do want to say something though about illegal e-scooters. There are many thousands of them. They don't have insurance, and the Met are seizing thousands of them every year. So the Mayor's been trying to work with commercial premises that are selling them to warn people that they are not covered by insurance and that they are, in fact, illegal on the road, but they continue to be sold. So we need national legislation around this urgently. The e-scooter, the Lime sort of, or the e-scooter trial is still in its, still taking place. So once that finishes, hopefully we'll get some learning out of that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. And Nick?
Thank you very much. Well, Susan will definitely be taking a very robust approach to this. We do understand it's an issue. It is cluttering. It is dangerous. I certainly, as a ward councillor, have seen a growing problem in the ward I live in and have the pleasure of representing. But that's not the only issue that Susan will be looking at that's very dangerous for elderly people and as they move around. That's these ridiculous floating bus stops. That's another thing that Susan will definitely be looking at, because it's such a danger when people are getting off the bus onto these floating bus stops and there's a bike flying down. Just whoever came up with that idea. So Susan understands the problem. I will certainly take it back to her and say that it's been highlighted today. And as Hina mentioned, it is, of course, in your manifesto too.
Thank you, Nick. I think we've got time for one more question. Should I take one from the... take one from the woman in the bluish-coloured polo neck. Oh, I'm sorry. Third row from the front.
Thank you. Talking about e-bikes, cyclists, has anybody thought about giving them A, a licence, and B, a speed limit?
Right. So, regulating the behaviour of cyclists. I'm going to turn first to Zoe on this one.
Well, everyone should be able to move around really safely and not be worried about being hit over by a cyclist. And I think a big part of that is working with the cycling campaign teams and making, you know, the big cycling groups within the city and making sure that we all know that we've got a responsibility to other road and pavement users. A big part, one thing I really do as a councillor is making sure that people don't skip traffic lights, because I know that that really terrifies people and stops people being able to get out and about. So I think this is about making sure that we've got appropriate cycling infrastructure, so cyclists are able to be in a protected cycle lane with their own infrastructure, and working with the campaign groups to make sure that that behaviour is appropriate for other people using the space, because I want as many people as possible to be able to have choice in the way that they move around, because I also hear, you know, for example, people terrified about the walk to work because of all the, and walk to school because of all the, you know, hostile infrastructure and people using their cars because that's a dangerous way. So we need to be giving people as much choice as possible to be able to use all different modes of transport, but also making sure that people are using those responsibly. Thanks.
Thanks, Zoe. Joanne, what would a Labour Mayor do?
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, we want to promote responsible cycling, and I think that starts early with education. So the Mayor of London has a walking and cycling commissioner, and there's quite a lot of funds that goes into schools to try and teach young people about road safety, but also about cycling safely as well. So that's really important. I would say I would agree about there's been a vast increase in dedicated cycle lanes under this mayoralty, and that's a good thing because it takes cyclists and the main off the pavements into their own lane, which is good for them and also for pedestrians. But I think education is key, and enforcement. I mean, I've been out with the roads traffic police when they've been doing enforcement action and stopping cyclists and giving warnings and penalty notices out as well.
Thanks, Joanne. Nick, what would a Conservative Mayor do on responsible cycling?
Well, look, once again, as I'm representing Susan, I'm going to take that back to her and say it's been raised. But what I will do is I'll step back and speak as Nick McLean here and saying, look, you know, we need to coexist, don't we, pedestrians, cyclists and motorists. And at the moment, cyclists seem to think that the rules apply to everyone else but them. And, you know, I know that the Secretary of Transport has looked at areas, you know, there's questions about should they have insurance? I think probably they should. Should they perhaps have a registration number on their bike? So if they do break the rules, as so many of them do, why not? But at the moment, that's not happening. And the behaviour is that there seems to be one rule for cyclists and one rule for everybody else. And Sadiq Khan's attack on motorists is creating an imbalance. Pedestrians, motorists and cyclists have to coexist. We have to respect each other, and at the moment I don't believe there is. I think cyclists have got it a little bit too easy.
I need to object to that. There have been a lot of cycling deaths.
I'm afraid we're just doing one answer per panellist on questions. Hina.
I'm not a cyclist. I have been learning. There's a great scheme that Merton Council does where they actually train people to learn how to ride a bike. And I think it's such a shame that we don't have that going across the board for all cyclists to have an approach where you if you're going to cycle, that you've had some sort of training or understanding of how to be going across around London safely and also courteously as well. I've been spat at by cyclists before. I know what that's like, you know, from the other end, and it's awful. And as a woman, it's quite scary as well. And it's one of the reasons that I've been put off from cycling myself, because I want to go out and cycle. My children cycle, my husband cycles. I want to be out there with them cycling too, but I'm scared because of the behaviour that I see. So we do need to do better. And I think one way of doing that is to encourage more funding. Hopefully we can get that for cycling training and making sure that people have a better understanding of how to get around in a courteous way, in a safe way. And also, it's not just cyclists who are just, you know, normal everyday cyclists just getting around. There's also people who use cyclists for their businesses, which we also need to be very aware of. I did some work on piecework on cargo bikes, and I felt that we really needed to professionalise and make sure that people who are on cargo bikes have got the right training, but are also, you know, seen in a professional way. That they're going around London promoting a business. Nobody is going to go to their business if they're being rude and discourteous and breaking the law. So a general look at cycling and making it a safe and appealing way of getting around London would be the best way forward. I'd love to get out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Hina. We've got time for one very, very quick question. Take it from Faye Sandler, who's in the second row towards the front. Sharon, do you want to come in? So, just as ever, and asked to keep questions concise, and do please introduce yourself first.
Thank you, Abi, for allowing me to speak to you guys. Thank you very much for today. Really appreciate it. I just want to raise a couple of things. The pension credit.
Can I just say, can we make sure it's a question rather than a...
Yeah, well, I just wanted to, because you mentioned pension credit and how many people have taken it up, they need to really reappraise the application form for pension credit, because a lot of people actually don't qualify, and yet they are in pension poverty. Regarding the police, I think you do need to reinstate more police stations. You need to reinstate accommodation. And regarding the buses, older people can't use cycles, some of them, and older people can't use the stations because none of the central London stations, where all the places of interest are step-free, and the buses have been taken, rerouted and everything. That needs to be reinstated, and bus stops that have been closed, particularly the West End, they need to reinstate bus stops.
Thank you very much. So an awful lot of issues there. The one that I'm going to pick up on, because you covered a whole range of things, was step-free transport and also thinking about accessible transport. So Joanne, I'm going to turn to you first.
Yeah, thank you for that range of questions, but we've been told to limit it. So since Sadiq became mayor, there's been 24 extra stations that are step-free. So that's gone from a quarter of stations step-free to a third, and the mayor is planning to increase that to a half. 51% of our rail stations are also step-free, and 95% of bus stops are. I was quite interested to read TfL's new Equity in Motion programme, and they're now rolling out mini platforms at stations. There's 45 in operating now, where there's a gap between the train and the platform, and so hopefully more, particularly wheelchair users, will be able to get around our city and more. So there's a whole range of work that has been done and that is in process, but it is a really important one, and we'll continue to do that. Thank you.
Thanks. So, Nick, step-free access and accessible travel.
Obviously a priority. Obviously, we'd like to see a lot more. Certainly, again, I'll take this back to Susan, but it is already on her radar. My own experience in Merton, we have Wimbledon Park, step-free access now. We have Motsford Park. Joanne, that's funded by the government. And
I've been waiting since 2013 for my local stations to get that money.
Let's hear from you.
So it is happening, and absolutely, because we know we've got to get moving. We need to be able to create, we talked about housing, and we talked about transport, but perhaps not so much about actually getting the city moving. London's now the slowest moving city, major city in the world. Low traffic neighbourhoods, 20 miles an hour, not enough access, as we're just hearing about, to get to your stations, poor outer London bus routes, and now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the ULEZ, the ultra-low emission zone, the tax on the poorest in society, you've got to pay £12.50 to drive your car. Once again, as I said earlier, you know, we need politicians that are going to make your life easier, not tell you how to live your life. And unfortunately, Sadiq Khan is only interested in telling you how to live your life.
Thank you, Nick. Hina.
Wherever you find a Lib Dem councillor, you'll find them campaigning for step-free access. I can guarantee you that. We have been completely committed to this. So the Liberal Democrats and Rob Blackie, you'll find in their manifesto when it's out soon, will be fully committed to making sure that we can get step-free access as much as possible if we can. You know, I want every station accessible. I mean, if London is not accessible to all, then we are going to be losing out on so many potential people who want to get a job here, who want to live here, who want to thrive here. If you can't get here, you can't enjoy the wonderful parts of London that, you know, the entertainment, the clubs, the bars, the cinemas, the theatres, the nightlife needs it to be accessible too. So it's dependent on London's economy to make sure that we have accessibility and step-free access across the board when it comes to London's transport. So I'm fully committed to this. I really want to make sure it happens. I've got a dodgy knee. I need a lift. Wherever I go, I'm looking for the lift, wherever I am. So it's personal. I want this to happen. So yes, absolutely, we are fully committed to making sure that we can make London accessible, getting step-free access for everyone. That would be amazing.
Thanks, Hina. And finally, Zoe.
Yeah, I completely agree that this is a priority, and I agree with the sentiment that we need to open London up and make sure that people can get to anywhere they need to get to. I also think that when there's issues and things are broken, people need to be informed ahead of time. I had a real bad experience in Dalston Junction, where I'm a councillor recently, of someone not knowing and having to pull themselves up the stairs because they didn't know that the lift was out of action. So I think the system as well needs to work better to inform people ahead of time so they can change their travel if things are out of service. But yeah, absolute priority alongside toilets, seating, water fountains, step-free access, benches. Let's make London as accessible as possible. We also talk about making sure, I think I mentioned this briefly earlier, that improving the space on a bus so that two wheelchairs can go onto the bus together and travel together, or not wait for the next bus, which I also think is really, really important. And there are adapted bikes. There's Wheels for Wellbeing. They do adapted bikes for anyone who's interested in getting cycling who might not be able to use a regular bike. Yeah, lots to do to make London more accessible.
Thank you very much. We're now going to move to closing statements from the candidates. I'm conscious that there are a lot of questions in the room that have not been answered. So as I mentioned before, we will be sharing contact details for all of the candidates, and I would urge everyone here who's had a question that hasn't yet been answered to please get in touch with the candidates, ask your questions, share your views. We really want this to be the beginning of conversation between the candidates, and we will be sharing contact details for them with through our newsletter. If you don't receive our newsletter online, then come and speak to one of the team, and we will make sure that we will share that information in a way that works for you. Yes, yes. So if you come,
I just thought that when you phoned
yes, I was
numbers.
just saying, if you come, if you're not online, come speak to a member of the team, and they'll make sure. So if the team could wave their hands up, there's John and Sharon towards the back. They can help provide that information.
Hello.
There's Carrie towards the back, and Dee. Go and speak to them afterwards, and we'll make sure that we get that information to you in an accessible format. Now going to turn to closing statements from our candidates. So you might want to reflect on some of the questions that you've heard, or add in anything new. First, I'm going to turn to Joanne. The last things you'd like to share with us all.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing us today and asking your questions. Older Londoners contribute so much to our city, and London would be nothing without you. I think we should be proud of what we've achieved so far, but we need to work together to make sure that we achieve more. I hope I've shown today that the Mayor is dedicated to delivering on your manifesto and is the best person to take this forward. This will be a two-horse race between a Tory candidate or Sadiq. And can I just say, Sadiq stands for London's values of openness and tolerance and opportunity.
We want to hear from the panellists at this point.
Okay. Can I say the Tory candidate represents the worst of Tory failure, incompetence and division over the last 14 years.
We want to hear from the panel, please.
She supports Donald Trump. She's retweeted tweets from Enoch.
Excuse me, we need to make sure that our panellists can be heard.
It does not represent Londoners' values. Can I say we want to put the views of older Londoners at the forefront of what we can do together so we continue to make the capital a better place for older Londoners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanne. And can I just say, when we hear from the rest of our panellists, please can everyone not speak at the same time, because then no one gets to hear what's being said. Excuse me. We want to be able to hear from the people on the panel, and if we've got everyone in the audience talking, then that won't be possible, and it just turns into a waste of time for everyone. So now I'm going to ask for closing remarks from Nick McLean.
Thank you very much. Look, thank you very much for having me here today. And as I promised, I will take all the comments and everything that's been raised back to Susan. Doesn't it say something when Joanne has to go personal, has to attack Susan personally, rather than focusing on Sadiq Khan's delivery? And the reason she doesn't want to focus on his delivery because he has failed. Let's look at it. The Metropolitan Police in special measures, presiding over ever-increasing levels of crime. The London Fire Brigade in special measures. Mismanagement of TfL finances causing gridlock and delay. Londoners being inconvenienced constantly by the disruption caused by endless protests. The proportion of houses built in London versus the UK, the lowest since the financial crisis. And then you've got the ULIS. And the price for all of this, for all us Londoners, a 70% increase in the precept. The Mayor has a budget of £21 billion. But as ever from Labour politicians, all we ever hear is, we need more money. We need more money. More money does not always solve. It is nice, but it is not always going to be the thing that'll solve the problem. But what we've also seen tonight, and this is why it's so important, and this is what Susan will give, leadership. It's always, under Sadiq Khan, it is always someone else's fault. He never takes responsibility. The first requirement of a leader is to take responsibility. Susan will do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And Hina, your closing remarks.
I promise I won't go over time this time. I just wanted to say that if you have Liberal Democrats elected, we really do make a change. So Sutton Council has been delivering a dementia wellbeing support centre with the support of Age UK in Sutton. Kingston have got made massive improvements from hospital to home processes. Lib Dem run Richmond Council have been leading by example over the business-led community toilet scheme. Lib Dems who get elected really do push for change, and in the London Assembly we've been doing that again and again and again, and we can make the difference again this time round. So on May the 2nd you have a choice. Now, you can vote for the Liberal Democrats on all 3 ballots, for the mayor, for the constituency and for the list. And on the list, every vote counts. Wherever you are, vote. You will be listened to and you will have your voices heard. So vote Liberal Democrat on the May the 2nd to get some real change, some real positive change, to make sure that you are listened to and to make sure that older Londoners have an accessible London for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've heard some really, really important and serious issues raised today, and I just want to fully commit to Age UK's manifesto. I think it's full of incredible ideas, and I know that you've got lots more, so please do send them and get in touch with me so I can hear all the other things you think that the next Mayor of London needs to be doing. I'm here as the Mayor of London candidate for the Green Party because I see this as incredibly important. I've come here today to listen to you directly and to make sure I can take things back to the team, and so that we can make our manifesto as strong as possible, because you deserve so much better as our older Londoners of our city. As you've heard, we're fully committed to pre-9 a.m. travel, more toilets, and Greens in the Assembly have pushed for all of those things to make your lives better. And as Hina said, you get 3 ballots on 2nd of May, and I would implore you to vote Green on all 3 ballots to get more Greens back into City Hall. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And as I mentioned, we will be sharing information and resources over the coming weeks about how you can contact the candidates, how you can make sure that they hear your views and that they hear your voices. It's really important that the candidates continue to hear from older Londoners, from their experiences, hearing their views. And as an Age UK London team, we'll be continuing to work with the candidates to make sure that they're aware of our manifesto and to encourage them to adopt the pledges that we're putting forward. I just want to end with a few very quick thank yous. Also a quick thank you to Quentin Maxwell-Jackson for creating our wonderful film. Huge thank you to the Age UK London team. Please do wave all of them. We've put in an enormous amount of work. They've put in a massive amount of work into making today possible, and I'm really grateful for everything that they've done. I'd like to say a big thank you to our panellists, Joanne McCartney, Nick McLean, Hina Bokhari, and to Zoë Gerbutt. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abi.